So Ian is one of the bravest people in the room, for sure. One of the bravest people in South Africa. You came to the public consciousness in a big way at a public gathering. Will you tell us the story of Shut Up?
Yeah. I must say, if I had 10 rand for every time someone has told me to shut up since, I would be a very, very rich man today. So what basically happened, I think context is Action Society, which is the organization that I work for, is a small organization that oversees gender-based violence matters. But not necessarily, not that I'm downplaying it, but we look at very serious violent offenses and severe murder cases. We started with the oversight model on investigations and prosecution oversight in the Cape Flats. And it sounds terrible, but it was literally because we can pick and choose. That's just how rife it is. That day was in Gugulethu, and my wife, being my wife, she said to me, "You need to go." And I said, "I don't want to go." I received this thing that Minister Bheki Cele would be having an Mbizo there. And I said to her, "I don't want to listen to him. He never delivers on anything he promises, and he lies to people." And she said, "Just go." And it was the weirdest thing, because I got in the car and she sent me a voice note and she says, "I just want to pray for you this morning." And I thought, yes, my wife doesn't ever tell me she wants to pray for me in the morning, maybe later through the day, but usually when I ask for forgiveness for something. So, and I drove there, and it was an incredible thing, because it was in the middle of Gugulethu. I don't know who was in Goog's last, but it's not great. Obviously there are parts that are developing well and so on, but the amount of people moving to get jobs and everything puts severe pressure. And violent crime is serious. I don't think I visited there once in the last 3 or 4 times I was there that you don't drive past the murder scene. That's how serious it is. Got to the Kwezi Centre, and I counted the police parking spaces that had been marked out for the minister's entourage. He had 19 parking spaces marked out for him. Okay. I noticed a water cannon standing outside, armoured water cannon, those nice new ones that SAPS has, and a hell of a lot of cops, from flying squad, K9, etc., etc. And I walked in and I went and sat at the back. My purpose was not to say anything. You can imagine, I'm not only white, I'm very pale as well. So I stand out in Gugulethu. So I think immediately, I knew some of the Metro cops there, and they greeted, and I think they thought, "What the hell is this guy doing?" And I just sat at the back, and we started kind of, I watched everyone come in and so on, and as always, Minister Khehla was late, and when Khehla walked in, he had this very charismatic type of, he's good like that. Like, he walked in with a presence, people stood up for him, and he had this whole entourage. So he had TRT looking after him, K9 Provincial Intervention Unit, Provincial Violent Crime. There was a specific intervention unit from the Provincial Commissioner's Office, local police. There were about 3 or 4 stations that were sent there. I would imagine there were no less than 130 or 140 cops just standing around there. His first comments that he made were derogatory to Metro Police and were derogatory to neighborhood watchers. And I still didn't say anything. And then he made a whole speech, and he said derogatory things, almost arrogantly so, playing politics. And I'm going to speak about, just work something in later about what happened yesterday morning. And he mentioned this, that Metro Police need to know their place. It's only SAPS that has a mandate. It will always be like that, etc., etc. And then there was a chance for questions and answers. There were 20 opportunities. First round, 10 people. Second round, 10 people. I still kept quiet. Then about probably 9 out of the 10 people that spoke really took him on, and mostly ladies. Like, they did not hold back. They took him on, and he shrugged them off. In fact, he smiled and laughed at some of them. And I thought to myself, what is wrong with you, man? What gives you the right to laugh at these people? You have no idea what their lives are like. I mean, I'm not an expert on Googs, but we spend a lot of time in Khayelitsha. We spend a lot of time in places like Manenberg, Hanover Park, Bonteheuwel. Tian, my colleague sitting at the back there, the other day we were in Beacon Valley, and you're in a meeting and you hear the shooting outside a church. It is a war zone, that place. And he laughs at them. And then when the second round came, I decided, well, stuff this, I'm going to say something. So I put my hand up, and I actually just wanted to read him some stats. But I didn't have stats with me, and I left my pen in the car. I always hold a pen when I speak. Left my pen in the car, so I grabbed my notebook, which is the second best. Everyone asked me afterwards what was in your notebook, but it was blank. And I didn't really have anything. But when I started speaking, I realized that people agreed with what I was saying. And I thought to myself, but bugger you never want to debate. It's kind of like, like Tim was saying now about some of the scientists that never want to debate. If it doesn't suit their narrative, they'd rather decline the interview. And Minister Cele, I think, has never been on a platform where he was allowed to be challenged. And then I spoke, I said what I said. I assume many people saw the video, and I sat down. And after me, another 7 people spoke. Then he got up with closing remarks, and he's making jokes. And it's a typical ANC thing. What they very often do, especially at the crime type of meetings where people confront them with crime and violence and so on, they downplay it by making jokes, so you win the crowd back. They laugh a little bit and so on, so you kind of lighten the mood, and then you respond calmly, and, it kind of diffuses the situation. Minister Cele then did that. He spoke, and he suddenly pointed at me. And I knew, oh, yeah, he wat het ek nou gedoen. And then he said a few things, but stood out is, I won't listen to someone that regards me as a garden boy. Now, you can say a lot of things about me, but I wouldn't have been there on my own, the only white oak in probably a 10-kilometer radius, if I had a problem with the people around me. And it's at that stage I stood up and I said, Minister, retract your statement. And that's when the whole shut up thing happened. And he said, sit down. I said, no, you're not telling me what to do. You can't determine who or what I am. You have no right to infringe on my character or integrity. And, he was trying to get momentum from the crowd by pulling the race card, and it didn't work. So he shouted, and then that big colonel from Limpopo came walking on. And I must say, it's the first time in years that my elbows touched each other behind my back, because that guy was strong. He said to me, sit down. What? Sit down, white boy. And I said to him, Colonel, it's got nothing to do with you. Stay out of it. I'm speaking to the minister. And next moment he grabbed me. And in the next moment, the whole TRT comes running in, R5s, helmets. And I thought, just imagine if they were doing this in a 1.5 kilometer radius in Googs, Went outside. I saw on the video afterwards that the one guy was reaching for his cuffs. I don't know what they would have charged me with. I did nothing wrong. There was no criminal offense. And then the next moment, 2 brigadiers came running out, a female and a male brigadier, and they said, let him be, let him go. And I said, and at that stage, they were still kind of grabbing me and so on. And I looked around, and Marvin Charles, a journalist from News 24, I saw him, and I thought, nou moet jy skree, because I'm not sleeping in Gugulethu tonight. I'm not sleeping in those cells. It's not a nice station. And I saw Marvin was filming, and I just shouted. I said, why are you doing this to me? I caused no harm to anyone, And it's important, I'll leave it there for the rest of the discussion, but it's important before we discuss everything we're going to discuss today, because, if we've come to a point in South Africa where you can't oppose someone respectfully, I know I was very direct in what I said, But there's nothing wrong with being direct yet respectful. If he then accuses me of being a racist, which I'm not going to stand for that. And I'm tired of seeing people in South Africa trodden on, and we kind of accept it because that's the narrative we should follow. That's nonsense. And Gugulethu taught Khehla an important lesson that day, because ever since, if I go to Gugs, Galicha, whether it's Hatsi, Taiwan, Mfuleni, whatever, the people look after you. You've got nothing to worry about. They look after you. There are no bodyguards, no nothing. They look after you. And he's never been there since. And none of the things he promised that day were delivered, in short.
I hope those of you who attended many of our conferences will have noticed our new branding, which we're very proud of. But it says, "Get context, no more." And that really was a perfect introduction to your presentation now, Ian. So,
thank you. Thank you very much, Alec. I want to start in a way that I wasn't planning to start. And I want to start because of yesterday. I didn't choose the song that I walked up on. I said to Colin, no song. I don't want to be like Gayton. And I'm going to say something directly. I joke about it now, but I'm very disappointed about what happened yesterday morning. Because and I'm going to say it very bluntly, while two people stood here playing stupid politics, one woman is raped every 10 minutes in South Africa. While Gayton put on, and I'm disappointed that he's not here this morning, put on a stupid tweet about a stupid song that he played when he walked up because Helen Zille was sitting in the front row. There are at least 4 people murdered every hour. So he's playing stupid songs and making stupid jokes and playing stupid politics. And I'll show you now what the result is of irresponsible people that get into the wrong positions. So I'm saying it very bluntly, but I must also say that the point of this presentation is not what I heard yesterday morning. The point of this presentation is to give you context, exactly your slogan, and it's to give you an idea of where or how we can have some hope for the future. I don't want us to walk out and feel disappointed when we heard songs and showboating. I want us to see context about what the reality is in South Africa, and then I want to speak about the solutions, and I hope afterwards we can chat about that a little bit more. This specific, I'm calling it the case for the prosecution, and the reason being, we've been very involved in the whole devolution debate in South Africa. Should we devolve policing in a place like the Western Cape? Why, etc. I'm going to get to that. The case for the prosecution, that name comes specifically from the idea of what happened. Very often we hear, no, but everyone in SAPS is not bad, and we know that. But it's like saying everyone in Eskom's not bad. We know that, but we still have load shedding. We need to tackle the problem. And I want to give you an overview of what happened over the last 20 to 25 years. And I want to start with this quote. So I'm going to read it to you, and then I'll share more. So, from the Strategic Organized Crime Assessment, September 2022, from the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. And just before, let me just scroll one back before you read more. There's a book called Give Us More Guns by Mark Shaw. I don't know if it is back there, but if any of you can get your hands on that book, it's absolutely remarkable because it paints this picture of how SAPS has actually become a criminal entity, not because of junior or middle-ranking members that are criminal, but because of how high-ranking members have not only infiltrated SAPS, but have become subject to extortion, etc., and eventually they become part and parcel of the problem. So in this report, it says SAPS remains an institution without strategic direction when it comes to organized crime. It's still committed to a high visibility, low impact approach that centers on taking down high flyers and making big seizures and large numbers of low level arrests. So just make a note there. We're going to talk about conviction rates later. It's important to take note of. This is enmeshed SAPS in a cycle of reward and focus that disincentivizes intelligence, analysis, and investigation. Promotion is based on stats and not impact. while there is poor to no training in intelligence and detective capabilities. Now, one little point that they missed there is promotion is also often based on political affiliation and not merit. And I'm going to speak about that shortly too. Although there have been several notable joint initiatives, trust between SAPS and Western law enforcement agencies is patchy unless there's a significant improvement in this regard. Operations against sophisticated transnational organized crime networks will suffer from a lack of crucial intelligence and high-level operation support. So, the same organization, last report they did, indicated that between South Africa, Zimbabwe and Mozambique, there are around 3.8 million illicit firearms in circulation. 3.8 million. Okay. I'm going to speak about firearm losses in SAPS soon. But remember, I mean, as context again, we know that there is war in parts of Mozambique. We understand that. So obviously that makes up a large amount. But 3.8 million firearms is a substantial amount of firepower in the wrong hands. Now, what went wrong? This picture is a picture of, I'm not going to say his name, he's a hitman for the 27s in Plainvlei, Mitchells Plain / Cape Flats, posing, showing his number sign in an anti-gang unit commander's vehicle in the middle of the day. Photo was leaked to me by a whistleblower. I contacted several officers, not only police, etc., and I was told that, yes, we've seen the photo in that past week, but we need to know who took the photo. I said, Jesus, guys, why? How is it possible that a known hitman of a gang like that can pose in a captain's vehicle? It's interesting, after the photo, the captain was placed on special leave for a month, and guess what? He's back at work doing his thing. This is to show you that SAPS has been hijacked by criminals. There's no other reason. The fact that they can't understand the difference between cyanide and sinusitis says enough. As we heard from Helen last night regarding Andre de Ruyter. I'll come back to this again later. The official findings and statistics, by the way, we can arrange free counseling after this half of the presentation because you might not feel great, but the end has some hope in it. So please bear with me. Everything's not just doom and gloom. You're not going to feel great after the first half. So let's start with this. Since about 2012, it's a little bit more now. More than 10,000 police officers were charged with murder, rape, and assault since 2012. Only 50 of them were suspended. That's pretty remarkable. That means a lot of them are still in uniform. We actually have a case. I visited the victim last week in a place called Klapmuts, not far from Paarl in the Western Cape, where a child, a teenager, I think 17 or 18, was severely beaten and kicked by a male cop, and he's in uniform. It's been reported to IPID, etc., and there's just zero response. And it's this dynamic also where, middle class upwards, you can appoint a private investigator, you can get a lawyer, you can get eyes on it. But it's so frustrating, and I'm going to share a few of the case examples now. When you go to poorer communities, it's almost like they disregarded because, they can't do anything to us. So whatever, it's just another Khehla murder. And that mindset needs to change. Now, the sad thing is we get accused by someone like Cele, where he told me, I know everything about human rights. Do you? What are you doing for those people that are facing these horrific and heinous crimes? We've been ranked very high on the Global Organized Crime Index 2021. We're 19th out of 193 UN member states, and we're 5th out of 54 African countries. We have become a breeding ground for organized crime. It's what we do. It's become part of the so-called moral fiber of many parts of South African government. And I stand to be corrected, but in my opinion, the ANC is the biggest criminal syndicate that South Africa has seen over the last 2 decades. In 2021-22, due to non-payment by SAPS, the Property Control Exhibit Management System, it's basically the system where evidence, etc., is stored, was shut down. We lost 8 million pieces of evidence. That means that if something were to happen to you and we could possibly match a perpetrator, use to cross-reference evidence, etc., we can't do that anymore. And since then, that system hasn't been switched on. They kind of developed their own thing, but it's not functioning the way it should. Remember, just take a breath, have a glass of water tea. There is hope. You would have heard a Western Cape judge last year who said that SAPS has been compromised at the highest levels. And I agree with this. I really do agree with this. And I agree with this because even if a Bheki Cele acts in a certain way, or we see gangsters posing in vehicles, there's zero consequence. When you go to places like Manenberg, Ballard, Elsie's, Alex in Joburg, perfect example, Inanda in KZN, the list goes on. The majority of people, not only the good cops on the ground, but community members will tell you, that guy, he was arrested, but he was out in 2 days' time. I had a case reported to me yesterday in the Western Cape where a group of Namibians that are involved in armed robberies throughout the Western Cape were reported to be driving through Paul. Paul police just declined the call to stop them. They passed through Klapmuts, again, declined to stop them. And then there was a little group of cops that were keen from Kraaifontein, pulled them over, seized a firearm, arrested all of them. Next day, call from a general, release them, let them go. No firearm charge, no charges laid against those individuals. Lastly, in terms of the judgment, it's important to also know Minister Bheki Cele's, or the questions that I want to ask around him. Why does he really want to classify the Kenya report? Charles Kenya was murdered in cold blood because he was investigating senior members of the police that were doing dodgy deals with gangsters, amongst firearm trading, etc. So remember that with Chris Prinsloo, when he was a colonel in the police, he supplied more than 9,000 firearms to gangs in the Cape Flats. 9,000 firearms. Now, that's one cop, and that's probably just the scapegoat because it's impossible for one person to do all of that. They were said that he had 2 partners, but even for 3 people, it's quite difficult. Why would he classify it? Who are those high-ranking officers that were involved in this, that were being investigated too? Overview of statistics, 3.5 people murdered in South Africa every hour. We've got 84 murders per day. Only 14.5% of murders are solved. To give you context to that, that means that if there are 10 murders, 8.5 of them will be unsolved. There will be no justice for those victims. That's why people we all see the increase in assassinations, hits, etc., political assassinations. There's just little or no consequence. You do what you want because nothing can really happen to you. And even easier, you can very often use a police firearm to do it. In terms of women and children, 3,753 women murdered per year. It's actually a little bit more. I think this is an old number. It's almost 7,000 according to me now. More than 130 rape cases per day. That's 6 per hour, 1 every 10 minutes. And remember, less than 10% of them are reported. We say a research a few years ago showed that only 1 in 9 rapes are actually reported in South Africa. Rape cases reported between April and June 2021 is 10,000 rape cases. Now, it's challenging because how do we get justice for people when we've got a DNA backlog? I'm going to talk about the DNA backlog now. Conviction rate for rape is less than 3%. And if we go and look at other countries of war, I didn't add this to this presentation, but we can go and study it. You don't see the same alarming numbers. It's almost become okay. I mean, the mayor of Kanaland in the Western Cape is a child rapist. He's a convicted child rapist. Everyone knows it, but certain people still vote for him. And besides that, he just says, if you don't come from Kanaland, it's not your problem. gender-based violence in general is a challenge. It's kind of become a buzzword that I think is abused very often, just to protest about something or to get some kind of sensation. But the conviction rate with regards to it is very worrying, and I want to use 3 examples. The first one is Sipukazi Boy, and I spoke about Sipukazi's case in the Bheki Cele incident as well. Sipukazi was beaten into hospital by her so-called boyfriend about 2 years ago, and he still got bail, despite the fact that she could hardly breathe after it happened. And when he was out on bail, as soon as she was released from hospital, took her to his house, he murdered her, and he burnt the body. I'm not going to go into the detail of that. So we need to ask something like protection orders. Why is it not working? Because she had a protection order. And why did he get bail? Because if he didn't get bail, chances are Sipukazi would still be alive. Child murders increased by 37% in 2021. It's gone up even more in the last quarterly stats. The 2 cases that we are overseeing at the moment is Bukabo Po and Mia Botha. We have, I think, 6 child murders at the moment, but these 2 cases, what specifically stood out about them is the lack of DNA reporting and the lack of interest from SAPS to actually step in and catch the perpetrator. So with Bukabo, it took a few weeks just to finalize DNA reports for the family to have the body released to have a funeral. They couldn't find all the body parts, so they still haven't completed that part of the investigation. Now, at least someone was arrested. It was a positive arrest, etc. But with Mia's case, she was murdered in September of last year, and her DNA report came out yesterday only. So after all of that, the perpetrator is still walking around. And instead of having cops kick down doors to find the perpetrator after it happened, they sent public order policing in case the community would riot. And that tells you that the intention of what needs to happen is completely skewed. Just more horrific stats on children. Single detectives have between 300 and 500 dockets each. It's impossible to do that type of work, and I guarantee you there are thousands of amazing cops out there, and they work under severe pressure. Between 2005 and 2017, SAPS lost over 26,000 firearms. In 2019 alone, they lost about 10 million rounds of ammunition. DNA backlog still not solved, unfortunately. Khehla says the original amount is solved, but he neglects to say that we have over 900 new cases coming in every week that obviously add to the load. Working conditions of SAPS, we hear boots on the ground, etc. I can tell you personally that I know of many, many, many amazing people that still wear that uniform, but they are so frustrated because they do make good arrests, but if you do, you're intimidated or transferred. Or when you do make a good arrest, you even become a target for assassination. That gangster that I showed you, his predecessor, I know the cop that arrested his predecessor, and he was transferred after arresting him. The next day when he walked in, he was transferred. I know another cop that led an operation to raid a specific gang leader's house in close to Mitchell's Plain, and the next day he was transferred to a Western Coast station. It just within 24 hours, general calls and says, there you go. I want to get to the solutions. I can go on with doom and gloom for long, and I know we still have a whole discussion, so I don't want to take up too much time. The last few stats, just 2 more slides on stats, is we lost over 60,000 SAPS reservists over the last decade. We only have about 3,500 active reservists at the moment. This makes it a big challenge. Reservists was a great way to give communities some kind of statutory power, some kind of real fighting power. Now, the impression is often given that, there was a that there was a solution after reservists or a solution after the commandos, but that was never ever done. In 2016, or since 2016, between 2016 and 2019, government released almost 100,000 Schedule 8 offenders without taking their DNA samples. So that means that Schedule 8 offenders, typically murderers and rapists, are back out on the street, and Ronald Lamola, our great Minister of Justice, just shrugs and says, sorry, it's one of those things. One success that we managed to get is that we now have actually had the DNA, the new DNA Act signed by the President, which forces all of these offenders to have DNA samples given. So with the help of or collaboration between Action Society, the DA, and the and DNA for Africa, we managed to push that through. The last career commissioner that we had that wasn't connected to corruption was George Fivaz. He left the police in 1999. Now, the following graph, or the following slides, will show you a graph you will see there, and it's going to continue on every slide to show you how murder fluctuates. And I'm going to explain to you why that happens with the context of what happened inside SAPS during that time. So George Fivaz left the police in an honorable way, and then this gentleman came in. May he not ever rest in peace. Jackie Selebi disbanded all of our specialized units. He was part of the disbanding of the commandos. And when they announced that they would disband it, and a lot of people speak highly of Thabo Mbeki. Thabo Mbeki was the start of the organized crime syndicate that SAPS has become. So we need to be very careful to glorify someone that appointed this criminal as the National Police Commissioner. When Selebi came in, they disbanded all the specialized units and said that things must be combated on ground level and at station level. So obviously, it would help the stations, because now you take murder and robbery units, etc., and you place them in stations. So you still had a few years to go. I would say probably 10 years. Let's say up to 10 years. We've still got some kind of specialized capability to operate and to combat, these things. He was jailed for corruption, disbanded the specialized units, and they promised, and specifically Thabo Mbeki promised, that there is an alternative for the commandos. But someone like Johan Burger, that was working with Selebi at that stage, said that we were all generals, but we didn't even know of the alternative. So the alternative was a lie. After that, we had a short time with Bheki Cele. Actually, I want to just skip there. First, we had this one, General Nhlanhla Mkwanazi. Mkwanazi is now the Provincial Commissioner of KZN, and he's actually, in my opinion, the most experienced Provincial Commissioner that we have. He was Special Task Force. He really has discipline, etc. Unfortunately, he's also now been implicated in a thing where they didn't declare gifts that they got in a conference in Germany with Louis Vuitton bags. I don't know what it is with political leaders and Louis Vuitton in South Africa. It's just astounding. They have a thing for Gucci and Louis. But nevertheless, Lucky was there for about 6 months, and then he said to Parliament that I can't do this job if I keep on getting told what to do by high-ranking politicians as the police commissioner, and then they sacked him. Needless to say, he's still part of the police. Then we had Minister Bheki Cele, came in with zero police experience. He was also fired for improper conduct. I just want to say something about him. During his time, just before the Soccer World Cup, he pushed through thousands of police recruits, even though they failed their remedials. Many of them failed. And since then, we saw a massive increase in domestic violence in SAPS ranks. So cops shooting their wives shooting their husbands, shooting the kids, shooting themselves, etc. They didn't go through the relevant psychological tests to be able to wear the uniform and handle the pressure of the job. During his time as National Commissioner, just in the Eastern Cape, 47% of cops that carried firearms weren't competent to carry firearms. That was just the Eastern Cape, 25% nationally. And that comes from the SAPS's own report. Then came Riah Phiyega. I've got a... she really took us to new levels of disgrace. She gave herself a 10-year service medal after hardly a year or two. She gave herself the FIFA World Cup service medal. She gave herself a few others that I can't remember. When we released Broken Blue Line 2, I joined Frans Cronje for this, and him and I went to go and visit General Phiyega. And she was more concerned by the fact that her face was on the cover, and then we said the wolf is guarding the sheep, than the actual content of it. Now, I would also be offended by that cover, but I would say, what can we do to work together? And Frans and I said to her, General, why don't we tackle the problems that we've identified through this research and work together to solve it? And we got shown the door. She was then later on sacked, perjury, political interference, and you all know of the Marikana disaster that they were all warned of. Then came Khomotso Phahlane, and now this is important because I've neglected to speak about the graph. But if you look there, I said you have about 10 years after Selebi when you start losing skilled cops, right? So we were still able to combat something. It wasn't looking great, but we were able to fight a bit. Then the mass exodus of experienced cops started happening. Private sector around 2010, many cops went overseas. They went to the Middle East, etc. They went and worked there. Their skills were needed there. And Phahlane actually managed to do quite well. I was quite sad about the fact that he ended up also being corrupt. But he was a career cop, came through the ranks, he understood policing. The DNA and forensic side worked really well at that stage. He understood how it worked. And then, unfortunately, again, ended up being corrupt. Now, what's the irony of all this is that none, not one, apart from Selebi that's already in the grave, not one of them is behind bars. All of them are still free to do whatever they like. Khehla Sitole came in. Zero real specialized experience, was a career cop, but basic policing. And he became an absolute chess piece for the Minister of Police to do whatever he likes. Now, we all know what happened July 2021. He was fired also because of his involvement with dodgy procurement deals. And him and Minister Bheki Cele were involved with the whole tender issue regarding the forensic system that was switched off, etc. Also involved with a grabber deal where Fikile Mbalula, etc., used police money to buy a grabber for an ANC conference that they would use to obviously spy on other delegates at that conference. Then Masemola came in, and last two slides, promise. Masemola came in. He's the current national commissioner. He's already been accused of fraud. He's also a chess piece. It's kind of like Ramaphosa, you know. A lot of people had Ramaphoria. You know, when he came in, they said, oh, we're going to be saved. The savior has arrived. It's the same thing. He just spent 10 years before under corrupt commissioners. So he looked and he saw what they did. And the same with Ramaphosa. He saw and looked what they did and didn't do anything about it. Then I want to finish off with Major General Musholoji. She opened a case against me 2 weeks ago because I said that she's incompetent to do her job. The reason I said it is because she's 10 years in the police. She's already a Major General, zero practical police experience. She's been the visible police commander for the entire Free State, and she is now district commander of the Overburdened district in the Western Cape. And I made a short video, maybe too sarcastic, where I said, have you ever wanted to be a general in the South African Police Service? Well, it's your lucky day. I'm going to give you a quick guide for how to do it. All you need to do is get a diploma in public relations. You'll be appointed as a brigadier. Soon after that, without any competency or course, you will become the visible commander of the entire Free State. Soon after that, despite disciplinaries and grievances, you will become a Major General in the Western Cape with zero organized crime experience in a part of the province with some of the most serious organized crime problems, and you will be a general.